Well, thank you and good evening. It's so nice to see all of you here and to be back in Monterey. I haven't been here for 25 years. So just a few things have changed along the way. I actually live in South Carolina, but I take every excuse I can get to come out here to the West Coast, so it's very nice. I really wanted to wish all of you happy International Women's Day. Yeah. And a special happy birthday to the whip. I have really enjoyed, I got to know the whip through Demos, which is a think tank in New York, where I am a fellow. And I got to know the whip, and we have been building a relationship. And I've been so interested, if you're not getting all of their reports online so that you know what's going on globally with women, you should, in fact, sign up so that you get that. And I think that this has got enough vibrancy that you'll not only have an annual conference, but even more writers than you have now as part of the whip. And I'm really pleased to be part of this panel as well, a very distinguished panel that we had a chance to talk for a few minutes ahead of time. Some of us knew each other, some of us didn't, but we knew people who knew people. You know how women network, right? So that I know you're going to have a very interesting evening. I really thought it was particularly fun to be here the day after Catherine Bigelow won as director. It's 82 years it's taken for a woman to become an Oscar winner as a director. And about a week or two ago, I was up at the United Nations and I heard Gina Davis speak, and she told the story that in the film industry, the proportion of women behind the camera, the writers, the directors, the filmmakers, has stayed the same for 46 years. So it is an example of where we can go and where we haven't yet gone right in front of us since last night. Because I think that that's what this is really all about, as Kate said in her introduction. As we celebrate women's achievements, and there have been many, I think it's important for us to then say, and where do we need to go, and how can all of us, women and men together, get there? My premise, and the title of the book, is Women Lead the Way, but it's going to take women and men together to achieve what we need to achieve for full equality around the world and to solve some really big problems that, frankly, between all of you and me, don't look like they're quite solved yet with the current leaders that we have. You know, I graduated from nursing school in 1960. That's a long time ago, right? And it came to mind because I was filling out my form for the 50th reunion this afternoon. And my first day on the job as a nurse, I was fired at 10:30 in the morning. Now, actually, I was a very good nurse. I went to a very good school, Johns Hopkins, and I didn't make any mistakes between 7 in the morning and 10:30. But I was fired because I didn't stand up for a doctor. In those days, doctors were all men and nurses were all women, although it has changed considerably, thank God, since that period of time. But it wasn't about anything but a system that didn't work. It did not matter how good of a professional I was, how well I cared for the patients, how dedicated or committed or whatever I was. What counted was I hadn't stood up for this doctor who came in. It didn't make any difference that I was sitting down taking care of a patient's IV because it wasn't working. That wasn't as important as the system required that I stand up for the doctor. So I know how much it's changed. It's changed for generation after generation, and I have a granddaughter who wants to be president of the United States, and I think that's just exactly right. But you know what? We do have some work to do. And I think we actually can do that work. Just to stay with the personal for a moment, our two children are now in their 40s. Both of them have children of their own. And they're dealing with the same family and work crisis my husband and I dealt with when they were little kids. We just haven't made enough progress on some of the issues we care about. And we haven't made that progress because it hasn't been priorities for the people who were making the decisions. It's not because we haven't advocated. It isn't because we haven't mobilized. It isn't because we haven't voted. It's because who sits at the table makes the decisions. And the people sitting at the tables haven't considered some of the issues we care deeply about to be important enough to put up on the priority list. So that's the answer. In short, you've heard my whole presentation. I'm all about, at this stage, being sure that we have enough women at the table to actually lead the discussion on solving a whole lot of problems that still need to be solved. Because many of the problems women want to solve, you mentioned violence and you mentioned poverty, Kate, in your beginning remarks, they're not just problems about women. They're societal problems that have been left to the side because they had a label on them that didn't sound like it related to the men making the decisions. So who sits at the table makes the decisions. It seems very, very obvious, but we're not there. Let me tell you for a second where we are in this country, because I've just had an interesting experience of going overseas, and I'll tell you a little bit about it, because there's a lot going on other places. We actually think we're the leaders on gender equality, and I've got news for you. Don't celebrate too much on that one. Where we are right now is we are without an inside-outside strategy. Do you know what an inside-outside strategy is? Okay, we're outside, right? We want this, we want that, women need this, women need help, we have this problem, we have that problem. On the inside, there's very few champions who are listening to that. They're listening to other issues, to other concerns, to other priorities. So that unless we have insiders and outsiders, we're not going to make the kind of changes that need to be made. So here's where we are. This is the bad news of this afternoon. We have 17% women in our Congress, and we celebrate all the time that this is the highest percentage that we have ever had, right? It's true. It's the highest percentage. That makes 83 countries ahead of the United States on the proportion of women in their elected legislature. That doesn't sound very good. And what country do you think is the leader in the world? Rwanda. Somebody knew the right answer. Oh, thank you very much. Who knew the right answer? Several people knew the right answer. But most people think it must be a Nordic country. You know, it must be Norway or Sweden or Finland or whatever. Well, some of those countries are on the list, but so is Argentina. You know, it's all over the world that people are focused on getting more women at the table. Not because it's a nice thing to do. Not because it's justice. But because it's how you get better results and better solutions when you have women's voices as well as men, women's ideas as well as men, women's priorities as well as men. So that's where we are in the Congress. There's a couple of states that have a large number of women, 6 of them, that have states at about the 30% women, which is what we know is the tipping point. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. I was in one of those states at the beginning of my book tour in October. And I was at Keene State University with a crowd just about like this, maybe a few more students than this. And one of the people in the audience was a woman who's in the state Senate in New Hampshire. New Hampshire has a majority of women in their Senate. They have the highest proportion of women in their legislature of any state in the United States. And not very many years ago, they were at the bottom. So I was really quite intrigued to find out. I know all the studies, but I was intrigued to find out what it really meant in terms of where the direction of the state is going.